Okay, so word has reached my ears that the ongoing theory about the multiversal war in Loki is actually the events of Secret Wars in 2015. Do I wish this was the case? Yes, because Secret Wars 2015 and the events that led up to it in Avengers and New Avengers, it's like one of the greatest comic book stories ever told, right? It's ridiculously good. It's written by Jonathan Hickman. It's amazing. All right, so you know what? Let's have some fun. Buckle your seatbelts, chaps. This is gonna be a wild ride. So the whole thing behind this is that it all starts with Black Panther. In reality, the whole thing that's basically Secret Wars and like Avengers, New Avengers is all just one giant Black Panther story. But the way this plays out is that you end up having this scenario where like people appear out of nowhere in Wakanda and actually end up killing some of the Wakandans, which drives Black Panther insane, right? You guys know he all cares about his Wakandan people. And so he ends up defeating a handful of them, and then he passes through this dimensional barrier and he sees like a red sky and another Earth. And so he ends up capturing what is basically the leader of this group, a woman by the name of Black Swan. And then after that, he reforms the Illuminati. So he brings together Reed Richards and Namor the Submariner and Captain America and Tony Stark Iron Man and Black Bolt of the Inhumans. The entire group is basically recalled together. And so what ends up happening here is they interrogate Black Swan and they come to the realization that what's happening is actually called an incursion. That somewhere along the line, an event was set in motion by a guy named Rabu Malal that basically leads to Earths crashing into each other. The way this works is that when an incursion starts, you have 8 hours until it finishes. When the incursion ends, only one of two things can happen. Either both Earths crash into each other and they wipe out both of their universes, or one of the Earths is destroyed and the universes pass through each other and nothing happens. And so one of the things the Illuminati do, because they don't really want to destroy worlds, they grab the Infinity Gauntlet, they get all the Infinity Stones and bring them together, because each one of them held an Infinity Stone to make sure that they stayed in safe hands. And so what ends up happening is Captain America gets the Infinity Gauntlet for the first time in Marvel Comics. He pushes the whole universe away, and in the process, all the Infinity Stones are destroyed except for the Time Stone, which vanishes. And so following that, the Illuminati are screwed. The only conclusion they can come to in terms of being able to, at the very least, keep their Earth and their universe alive while trying to find a way to stop the incursions is to destroy incursive worlds. Captain America is having none of it. He's like, nope, we're not wiping out whole worlds. We're the Illuminati, we're the most capable people in the world. There's something we have to do to stop this. And so Tony Stark directs Doctor Strange to wipe the mind of Captain America, and they throw him out. So Captain America doesn't remember he was ever part of the Illuminati. And so following that, the Illuminati kind of do two things. The first is they build a bridge to be able to look into alternate realities and see if there are any other universes out there where people found a way to stop the incursions from happening. And then two, they start destroying other worlds. Now, during this time, while this is all going on, Thanos basically shows up because he's essentially looking for his son across the entirety of the universe, because there's like some kind of prophecy that like his son will destroy him or something like that. That's where you're introduced to the Cull Obsidian. So like the Ebony Maw, Corvus Glaive, Proxima Midnight, Supergiant, Black Dwarf, all those characters. And so what ends up happening is they show up on Earth, great big huge series of events pop off, one of the greatest battles of all time. Like there's literally this point, there's this ridiculously amazing point where like Thanos is looking for his son, like he finds Black Bolt and like goes to attack Black Bolt of the Inhumans, right? And he's like, where's my son at? And Black Bolt like doesn't tell him anything. Black Bolt has a quasi-sonic scream, so whenever he talks, it basically emits a huge amount of energy, and it's enough to destroy a planet. He shouts at Thanos and like nothing happens. So Thanos is like, fine, keep your secrets, carry them with you to the grave, and like smashes his head in the ground, and it's like the coolest thing ever, right? So anyway, so Thanos is ultimately defeated and he's locked away. In fact, he's defeated by his own son, Thane. And so this basically leads to Thanos and the entirety of the Cull Obsidian just kind of being held in stasis. Now, eventually they're freed by a combination of things like Maximus the Mad and so on and so forth. And so ultimately Namor the Submariner allies himself with Thanos and the Cull Obsidian, because at that point in time, the Illuminati just didn't want to destroy worlds anymore, and Namor believed they didn't have what it took in order to actually pull this off. And so when he grabs Thanos and kind of tells him everything that's going on, Thanos and the entirety of the Cull Obsidian, the whole thing is they basically start going from world to world and wiping out entire Earths. The difference is that where the Illuminati were detonating these bombs and destroying the whole world in one fell swoop, Thanos and those guys were just culling the world, taking their time and like satiating in all this bloodlust, and then they would destroy the world. And so after that, Namor's just like, no, these guys are too extreme for me. So Namor goes to see Doctor Doom. So the funny thing about this is that Doctor Doom has this like amazing monologue, right? It's like this amazing moment where he's talking to Namor. They start talking about the nature of like the people in Latveria. And Doctor Doom's like, do you really believe that if these people didn't want to destroy me, that they wouldn't? The whole idea is I keep them fed, I keep them protected. So So before they pray to whatever god they pray to before they go to sleep, they give thanks to me. But ultimately, Dr. Doom turns down Namor's offer to help him find a way to stop the incursions, because ultimately Dr. Doom's like, I'm nobody's second choice, right? He's like, nobody's gonna come and pick me second. Now, during this time, while all this is happening and like they've freed Black Swan, the Illuminati are working directly with her to better understand the incursions and all that kind of stuff, there's one incursion that takes place where it involves a blue sky, which is a huge thing because normally the incursions are red skies. The blue skies mean map makers, and these guys are kind of wild. So the way this plays out is the map makers are basically individuals whereby they'll send forward a group called the Sidera Madres. And the whole point behind them is they will basically go to a world and they will conquer and sanitize the entire world. And then what they'll do is they'll ride that world to the next incursion point, so that when that world meets another Earth, they'll jump from that Earth onto the new Earth and they'll repeat the process over and over again. But what they do is they basically dislodge a chunk of that world by literally detonating a bomb, and it just shoots a chunk of that world out there, but it sends out a signal to the map makers, and the map makers follow their Sidera Madres and then show up on that world, and they're the ones who cleanse everything, right? So they're obviously not to be messed with. While that's going on, you've got a third group which we refer to as the Black Priests, and they're basically seeming to do the same thing that the map makers are. And then there's this kind of like unknown entity out there that's referred to as the Ivory Kings, right? So things kind of pop off, stuff gets really, really crazy. The important thing to understand here is that you end up getting this time skip called 8 months later. And this is basically when everybody learns the incursions are happening. Captain America is the director of S.H.I.E.L.D. He's like hunting down the Illuminati and trying to capture them and bring them in. You've got the Multiversal Avengers team, which is basically a whole bunch of Avengers that are going into the multiverse to try to find a way to stop the incursions. And then you still got the Illuminati, who are basically fugitives evading the law and then trying to find a way to stop the incursions. Like, everyone is trying to find a way to stop them. So anyway, what you end up having here is like all these different superhero teams going into like these different facets and trying to understand what's going on. Doctor Strange has disappeared a long time ago. Like, he vanished a while ago. So what ends up happening is the Multiversal Avengers meets up with Doctor Strange, and Doctor Strange is basically this guy who has allied himself with the Black Priests. And the way this works is that like if you get a cold, your body responds with the immune system. That's what the Black Priests are. The Black Priests are the multiverse just manifesting these beings that are supposed to kind of end the incursions by destroying enough worlds that the incursion just kind of balances itself out. And so the whole thing behind this is that Doctor Strange learns like all the powers of the Black Priest. He basically leads them now. He grabs the Multiversal Avengers and they basically split up into two groups. One part of the Multiversal Avengers goes into the multiverse to try to find what are called the Ivory Kings, these kind of mythical beings that people talk about but they've never actually seen before. And then some of the other Multiversal Avengers ally themselves with Doctor Strange and the Black Priest to find essentially Rabu Malal. And so this is when things get kind of crazy because they find the Ivory Kings, man, but they're not the first ones to do it. So you end up learning that at a previous point in time when the incursions first kicked off, that Hank Pym, Ant-Man, had been sent into the multiverse by Reed Richards of the Fantastic Four and the Illuminati to try to find the cause or the source of the incursions. So he ends up kind of telling like this crazy journey, right? Like he kind of appears out of nowhere, like he just comes through a portal and he's like, I found them. He's like, I found the Ivory Kings, the White Lords of Wild Space. They're the Beyonders. And then like Hank Pym's like, we're so screwed. Like there's nothing we can do to stop these guys. And there isn't, because the Beyonders are just stupidly powerful. So they're like, okay, like tell us what was going on. So Hank Pym's like, okay, man. So like I go into the multiverse and the problem is the multiverse is not really stacked layers of universes. It's just kind of, it's stacked and then sideways. There's no true north. So I had to give myself a kind of compass. He's like, after that, I started hopping through all these alternate realities. And so ultimately he comes across this point where like the Ivory Kings, the Beyonders, are killing all the cosmic entities from across the multiverse, right? It's just, it's cosmic genocide. Like they're wiping everybody out. And that's why the cosmic entities vanished when Reed Richards and all of them were talking to them, because it turned into like this huge multiversal conflict. So then eventually the living tribunal pops up, right? The multiverse given form. This being that's supposed to be like the supreme power of the multiverse, short of the one above all. And then like the Ivory Kings see him and 3 of them wipe out the living tribunal. And that's when like, when Hank Pym's like, these guys killed the living embodiment of the multiverse. What are we gonna do to stop this, man? We're a handful of characters here on Earth and we have no real meaningful powers that are anywhere near on scale with these guys. Enter Doctor Doom. So what ends up happening is Doctor Strange and the Black Priest and then the handful of the Multiversal Avengers end up going and finding Rabu Malal, only to find out that it's actually Dr. Doom. And what had happened is that Dr. Doom had basically met with a guy named the Molecule Man Owen Reese, who'd been around for an exceedingly long time. And the Molecule Man revealed his actual origin. And the way this played out is the Beyonders had basically used the Molecule Man as an experiment, that they had come across the existence of the multiverse, they were curious about it, and so they created one Molecule Man in every single universe. This guy is ridiculously overpowered. Imagine if a person could alter the atomic structure of the multiverse, and that's basically the Molecule Man, right? So the whole thing behind this is that the Beyonders wanted to detonate all the Molecule Men at one time, but Dr. Doom and the Molecule Man of the main Marvel universe kind of beat him to the punch by accidentally killing one. And when that happened, it obliterated the whole universe. What this did is it created a domino effect. When that universe blew up, it took the universes next to it and bumped those into the universes next to them, which bumped into the universes next to them, and so on and so forth. And so literally universes were just being pushed outward in like an explosion pattern, and that's what caused the incursions. It was all started by Dr. Doom. And so what they ended up realizing they had to do was travel across every single universe and kill as many Molecule Men as they possibly could. But killing a god is no small thing. And so in order to pull this off, Dr. Doom created the Black Swans to travel from universe to universe, just wiping them all out as he possibly could. During this process, the Beyonders became aware that Molecule Men were being destroyed across the multiverse, so they entered into the multiverse, and then they started killing all the cosmic entities, trying to find out what was going on with their experiment. And so what ends up happening here is one of the craziest things ever, right? What ends up happening here, there's some crazy event where like Reed Richards and the Illuminati are like, okay, so here's the entire standing of the multiverse, we have like a few 100,000 universes left, and then like that, they're gone, and it's like a dozen universes left. No, I'm sorry, it's only 2 universes left, right? It's the main Marvel universe and like the Ultimate Universe, right? And they're like, what happened, right? I mean, just like in the blink of an eye, they're gone. Now, the other part of this is that where Dr. Doom created the Black Swans, the Beyonders, because they couldn't consistently enter into the universe, they're the ones who made the map makers. And the map makers were doing what they were doing, charting the entirety of the multiverse to find out what was causing these incursions to happen in the first place. And so following that, things get nuts, right? Because what you have are like a few 100,000 universes that are left. All grievances have been put to the side at this point, right? It's just everybody doing what they can to survive. And then, oh my God, and then Thor and Hyperion die. Okay, so here's the crazy thing. So Thor and Hyperion's basically a Marvel analog of Superman. There's this crazy moment where like them and the rest of the multiversal Avengers end up facing off against like some of the Beyonders, right? So like 2 Beyonders come out, and one of them is destroyed by the Star Brand, who's basically a character that has as much power as he needs to destroy whoever he's fighting. And so ultimately, like most all of them are killed, and it comes down to Thor and Hyperion, who are the 2 guys left, right? Hyperion's eyes have more or less been gouged out at this point, and Thor's arm's been ripped off, right? So like, I mean, they're ragtag, right? I mean, like, you know they're not gonna make it. All these Beyonders come pouring out of this portal, and like Hyperion's like, we're gonna die here today. And Thor's like, yeah, man, but if we're gonna die, like, then I will see you in Valhalla. And like Hyperion's like, brother, today I will meet you there. And like they go racing into the Beyonders, man. They go racing into the Beyonders. And then it's just like in the deep cold blackness of space, there was a crack of thunder, something lightning, and then silence. And like that's the end of Thor and Hyperion. It's like the last ride of the gods of Marvel. It's one of the coolest moments ever in the whole story. I was like, oh my God, when they died, it was amazing. So the crazy thing about this is that you've got like a few 100,000 universes that are left in the multiverse, right? And so the way this plays out is that you end up having the Illuminati and these guys who are looking at these 100,000 some odd universes, and then suddenly they're down to 12 or down to 2. And they're like, hold on, how do we lose all these hundreds of thousands of universes and we're down to 2? Come to find out, what had happened is Doctor Strange, Dr. Doom, and the Molecule Man had gone around and captured all these Molecule Men from across the multiverse and then challenged the Beyonders to appear. And when they did, they had like all the Molecule Men encased inside this like giant box, and they released them all at once and detonated them. And so like it destroyed all the Beyonders, but in the process wiped out what was left of the multiverse. So there's like 2 universes left, the main Marvel universe and the Ultimate Universe, and like they're incursing on each other. And so basically you get like the final incursion at the very beginning of the Secret Wars event, and that leads to like the total obliteration of the entirety of the multiverse. And so basically like after that you have like Dr. Doom, who essentially recreates reality as best he can on Battleworld, which is like, it's a really rough spot, right? Like Battleworld's basically the Marvel cosmic version of like the south side of Chicago, you know what I mean? Like it's rough. And so ultimately like Dr. Doom is defeated by Reed Richards after the Molecule Man takes Dr. Doom's power away and gives it to Reed, and then Reed recreates all of existence, right? Like basically resets everything. So it was a nuts story. It was an amazing story. But having said that, if you want to see the whole thing in its entirety, check out the video in the description. Like, I covered the whole thing on Comics Explained. But here's the thing about this, right? So let's talk about how Loki and the multiverse would tie into this. So a lot of people are saying that it would be Secret Wars or the events leading up to Secret Wars because of like the whole segment that we got with the animation and the Multiversal War and all that kind of stuff. I would be fully on board with this if Feige and them had not come out and said that the MCU is essentially its own multiverse. Now, he said it's going to become its own multiverse. He didn't say that it is its own multiverse. And so we know that's coming later on down the line. Up to this point, the events of the Marvel Cinematic Universe are considered, or were considered, an alternate reality in the Marvel Entertainment, Marvel Comics landscape. And so there's room here to make the case that it is actually the events of Secret Wars that are being referred to in this Multiversal War. The biggest problem with this is the animation says that the Timekeepers were the ones who restored the timeline, not anybody else like Reed Richards. We know that it's not one of these things where like Marvel can't use Reed's name because Fox owns it, because Disney owns all that stuff now. So like they could use Reed's name if they wanted to and just be like, well, it was all fixed by Reed Richards. But if you look at the Timekeepers in Marvel Comics, they're not altruistic. They don't do things because it's the right thing to do. The Timekeepers are dicks. And so like all they really care about are themselves. Like that's it, just like maintaining their power. So it's 100% possible that like what you see in that animation is complete and total propaganda, right? I mean, one of the things we know from like that weird little assistant guy who was showing Loki all the Infinity Stones in the desk and saying people were using him for paperweights is that he's lived his whole life there. The guy didn't even know what a fish was. Is it that far out of the realm of possibility that they believe whatever the Timekeepers tell them, especially because the judge was looking at them from an almost like warship type position, right? Like, we believe the Timekeepers, like we don't really believe they're wrong or they do anything incorrect. Like they almost have a kind of religious zealotry about them in terms of how they view the Timekeepers. So it's entirely possible the Timekeepers are really just dicks and they're like, okay, look, like we're not the ones who fixed everything. It was really this guy who could stretch named Reed Richards in an alternate reality who fixed everything. And like that would be it, right? Which would be a great way to introduce Reed. But here's the biggest problem that you have. Even if it really is the events of Secret Wars that they're explaining, I mean, look at the explanation that I gave you, and that's a stripped down explanation, right? That's a basic explanation. You really gonna take all that and condense it down to what would amount to maybe a 10, possibly 15-minute explanation in either Loki or Doctor Strange 2? No, that's not gonna happen. So either it would be a modified version of that, which is far less eventful and impactful, or you would just kind of have to nullify it and just say that's not what we're referring to. If I'm being honest, I think the multiversal war they're talking about is something akin to a kind of blend between the King the Conqueror Empire and like the Universal Church of Truth. That's what I think is really going on. The Universal Church of Truth in Marvel Comics was actually a church that was founded by the future evil alter ego of Adam Warlock, a character by the name of Magus. And so technically the church only exists on a universal level. You don't really see them operating in a multiversal level, but the MCU could change that easily, right? I mean, literally a stroke of a pen fixes that problem. So like it's one of those things where they could be doing that and kind of merging it with Kang the Conqueror. The reason why I say that is we know we're gonna see Kang in Ant-Man and the Wasp 3. We know that we're gonna see Immortus, or at least the rumors that we're gonna see Immortus in the Loki TV show. And Immortus and Kang are basically the same thing. Imagine like you right now are Kang the Conqueror. Immortus is you 10 years ago if you didn't have any of the experiences you've had over the last 10 years. It's still you, just a different version of you. That's really all the difference is between Immortus and Kang the Conqueror. The important thing is that if we really do see those kinds of characters, what I think is actually going on in this multiversal war is it was largely all probably started by Kang or Immortus or whatever version they choose to make the main version of Kang the Conqueror is the bad guy. Whatever version they choose, he's the one that started it. And much like the Universal Church of Truth, he exists on a multiversal scale, right? So basically, Kang the Conqueror rules entire universes across the multiverse. And if he follows the Universal Church of Truth philosophy, then he'll basically show up to the multiverse, or at least to a singular universe, most likely Earth or some other landscape or whatever, and basically say like, you know, I am Kang the Conqueror, you should bend the knee to me and let me be your leader. And if they say, okay, cool, then he just kind of takes power and everything's pretty peaceful. If they say no, he just cleanses the place and executes anybody who basically dissented, and then he conquers it anyway. So that's what the Universal Church of Truth did in Marvel Comics. So I assume it'll be something akin to that, but I think the multiversal war they're talking about was likely started by Kang. Either that or like Immortus or whatever, it's all the same thing. I don't think it's the events of Secret Wars. It's just too much stuff to cram into a 15-minute explanation in a TV show or a movie, just way too much to do. I would say it'd be very possible if we got like Doctor Strange parts 1 and 2, then I would say say, okay, then that's probably it, because they could dedicate like half an hour or even like 45 minutes to kind of explaining all that stuff and making it all make sense, because they've basically got a 5-hour movie to work with, split into 2 parts. But like, we're not gonna get that. Like, it's too much to cover, too much to introduce, too much going on at one point in time. So let me know what you guys think down in the comments, and I will catch you all later. Peace.